What if I told you Trump just broke his own record? In 1 year, he signed 225 executive orders. His entire first term, only 220. But here's what nobody's talking about. This isn't just about numbers, it's about something constitutional scholars are calling unprecedented, something that has courts working overtime and legal experts using words like lawlessness. Before we dive deeper, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Today, we're unpacking a story that reveals more about presidential power than anything we've seen in decades. Let's start with the raw data. December 2025 marks an extraordinary milestone. Trump has now signed more executive orders in his second term's first year than he managed in his entire first presidency. The Federal Register shows 225 orders versus his previous 4-year total of 220. To put this in perspective, Biden signed 162 executive orders over 4 years. Obama averaged about 35 per year. Trump is operating at a pace that dwarfs every modern president. Franklin Roosevelt, during the depths of the Great Depression and World War II, averaged 290 per year across his entire presidency. Trump is approaching wartime levels of executive action during peacetime, but the quantity tells only half the story. The content of these orders reveals a president pushing constitutional boundaries like never before. We're talking about orders that attempt to eliminate entire federal agencies, redirect congressional appropriations, and fundamentally restructure how the federal government operates. Matthew Lebo, a political science professor at Western University, didn't mince words. He called Trump's executive order strategy a sign of lawlessness. Not incompetence, not overreach, lawlessness. Here's why that word matters. When Trump signs an executive order, he's essentially saying Congress is too slow. The courts can sort it out later. But what happens when courts start saying no en masse? They have. Multiple federal judges have invalidated Trump's orders on constitutional grounds. Over 150 judicial decisions have challenged these executive actions. That's not normal pushback. That's systematic judicial resistance. The University of Chicago analyzed this phenomenon. Their conclusion: many orders clearly exceed presidential powers, while others attempt to use valid presidential powers for invalid purposes. Consider the scope of what's being challenged. Orders targeting birthright citizenship, orders eliminating diversity programs across the federal government, orders restructuring civil service protections, orders redirecting military funding. Each one represents a constitutional battle. But here's where it gets interesting. Trump knows many of these orders won't survive legal challenges, so why keep signing them? The answer lies in something political scientists call governing by gesture. Each executive order sends a signal to Trump's base. Each court challenge feeds his narrative about judicial activism. Each media criticism becomes evidence of establishment resistance. It's theater, but theater with consequences. Consider the birthright citizenship order. Constitutional lawyers across the political spectrum said it was doomed. The 14th Amendment is crystal clear. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. But Trump signed it anyway. Why? Because the signing ceremony generated headlines. The court challenge generates more headlines. The eventual overturn will generate even more headlines about activist judges. Every step serves the narrative. Meanwhile, the order spent weeks in legal limbo, creating uncertainty for families and government agencies. The process itself becomes the punishment. Here's what should worry everyone. Regardless of political affiliation, presidential power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It expands through precedent. When future presidents see that 225 executive orders in 1 year generated minimal political consequences, what number will they think is acceptable? The Constitution's framers designed a system of checks and balances specifically to prevent this concentration of executive power. They feared exactly what we're witnessing: a president who treats Congress as optional and courts as temporary obstacles. James Madison warned about this in Federalist 47. He wrote about the dangers of accumulating legislative, executive, and judicial powers in the same hands, not because the person might be evil, but because the system would inevitably corrupt the office. Madison understood something we're rediscovering. Constitutional limits only work if political leaders respect them. When they don't, the system depends entirely on courts and Congress to enforce boundaries. But what happens when one branch simply ignores the others? But there's another layer to this story that reveals Trump's real strategy. Analysis from Bloomberg Government found that nearly 2/3 of Trump's executive actions mirror or partially mirror proposals from Project 2025. Remember how Trump distanced himself from Project 2025 during the campaign? How his team insisted he had nothing to do with it? Yet here we are, implementing its roadmap through executive orders. This isn't accidental, it's systematic. Trump ran a campaign promising to govern differently while preparing to implement the most radical conservative agenda in modern history. The executive orders are the delivery mechanism. Every order that gets challenged in court serves dual purposes. It implements policy for however long it survives, and it provides Trump with evidence that the deep state is working against the people's will. The genius is diabolical. Failed executive orders become proof that the system is rigged. Successful ones prove Trump can deliver where Congress cannot. Either way, executive power expands. Take the recent fentanyl order, designating the drug as a weapon of mass destruction. The legal basis is questionable at best. Federal law already treats fentanyl trafficking as a serious crime. But the symbolic impact is enormous. Trump gets to appear tough on drugs while creating legal chaos for prosecutors and defense attorneys. When courts inevitably intervene, he'll claim judges are protecting drug dealers. The constitutional violation becomes a political victory. The deeper question isn't about Trump's motives, it's about institutional damage. When presidents routinely exceed constitutional authority, knowing courts will eventually intervene, what happens to the system itself? Courts become political arbiters instead of legal interpreters. Congress becomes irrelevant to major policy decisions. The Constitution becomes a suggestion rather than the supreme law. This is how republics decline, not through coups or revolutions, but through the gradual erosion of institutional norms and constitutional boundaries. Look at Hungary under Viktor Orban. Look at Turkey under Erdogan. Both leaders used legal mechanisms to accumulate extraordinary power. Both claimed to be saving democracy from its enemies. Both left democratic institutions technically intact, while rendering them practically meaningless. The Hungarian model is particularly instructive. Orban didn't abolish parliament or suspend elections. He simply overwhelmed the system with rapid-fire policy changes, legal challenges, and emergency measures. Opposition parties spent all their time responding to crises instead of governing effectively. Sound familiar? While Democrats and moderate Republicans debate the constitutionality of Order 225, Trump is already drafting Orders 226 through 250. The opposition is always playing defense, always reacting, never setting the agenda. The patterns are unmistakable. Constitutional democracies die slowly, then suddenly. The process looks legal until it's too late to reverse. Here's what makes this moment different from typical presidential overreach. Previous presidents tested constitutional limits occasionally. Trump is stress testing the entire framework systematically. Each executive order represents a constitutional question. Can the president eliminate entire federal agencies? Can he redirect military spending without congressional approval? Can he declare national emergencies to implement policy Congress rejected? The answers matter less than the questions themselves. By forcing courts to constantly intervene, Trump is essentially arguing that presidential power is whatever he can get away with until someone stops him. This isn't governance, it's constitutional vandalism. Even conservative legal scholars are sounding alarms. Stephen Calabrese, co-founder of the Federalist Society, has warned about the dangerous precedents being set. When conservative legal icons start worrying about conservative overreach, the situation has moved beyond partisan politics into constitutional crisis territory. The pattern is becoming clear. Trump isn't just issuing executive orders. He's conducting a systematic stress test of American democratic institutions. Each order probes a different constitutional boundary. Each legal challenge reveals the system's capacity to respond. Consider the timing. Many of these orders arrive in clusters, overwhelming the court system's ability to respond quickly. While judges deliberate on Order A, Orders B through F take effect. By the time courts catch up, the political damage is done and new orders are already pending. This isn't legal strategy. It's legal warfare. The goal isn't to win every case, but to exhaust the system's capacity to resist. The irony is unmistakable. The same president who campaigned against government overreach is now demonstrating the most expansive view of executive power in American history. His supporters might argue this is necessary to undo years of bureaucratic excess. His critics call it authoritarianism. But the constitutional framework doesn't care about political preferences. It only cares about limits. And those limits are being tested like never before. Here's the paradox. Trump claims to be draining the swamp while creating the most powerful executive branch in American history. He promises to return power to the people while concentrating unprecedented authority in his own hands. This cognitive dissonance isn't accidental. It's the essential contradiction of populist authoritarianism, claiming to serve the people while systematically undermining the institutions that protect their rights. The more troubling reality is how normalized this has become. Political commentators now discuss Trump's executive order strategy as if constitutional violations were just another political tactic. Cable news shows debate the effectiveness of orders they acknowledge are legally dubious. We're witnessing the mainstreaming of constitutional crisis. What should be emergency interventions by courts are now routine political theater. What should be bipartisan alarm about institutional damage has become partisan scorekeeping. The republic depends on shared commitment to constitutional norms. When those norms become optional, democracy becomes fragile. The long-term implications extend far beyond Trump's presidency. Future presidents will inherit these precedents. If 225 executive orders in 1 year becomes acceptable, what number isn't? If constitutional challenges are just part of the game, what boundaries actually exist? We're conducting a real-time experiment in presidential power. The results will determine whether American democracy emerges stronger or fundamentally altered. The framers gave us institutions designed to prevent exactly this scenario. Whether those institutions prove sufficient remains the defining question of our time. But here's what should terrify everyone. Institutional damage is much easier to inflict than repair. Trump's executive order strategy might fail to achieve its immediate goals, but it's succeeding in normalizing constitutional lawlessness. Future presidents from both parties will remember that 225 executive orders generated mostly shrugs from the political establishment. They'll remember that courts eventually intervened, but slowly and incompletely. They'll remember that Congress largely stood aside, and they'll push even further. What do you think? Are we witnessing necessary presidential leadership or dangerous constitutional erosion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, but keep it civil and substantive. If this analysis opened your eyes to something new, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the political stories that really matter. We don't just report the news, we decode what it actually means. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.